Hello, Damnation, and happy Black History Month because here on the Danielle Moodie Show, we believe in Black history because Black history is American history. And it isn't just for Black people or for people of color, it is for everyone. So, we are going to be digging into the attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as the fact that MAGA really desperately wants Donald Trump to be their king. They are so hell bent on destroying our democracy and destroying themselves in the process. Buckle up, dear friends. It's another week in America, which means that it's another week for the Danielle Moodie Show. Let's get into it. Hello, dear friends, and happy February. January was 87 years long. So it is fantastic that we have finally crossed the threshold into a new month. And it is Black History Month. Whether or not the current administration, the current regime, would like to acknowledge what has been acknowledged and celebrated by every president since 1976. I don't need Donald Trump to celebrate Black History Month. I don't need his goons in their white supremacist garbs to offer up an empty MLK quote. I don't need them to pretend that they even know the tenets of the teachings of Martin Luther King Jr. that they love to throw around every single year. I don't need it. Do you know what I appreciate, folks, more than anything else? I appreciate the truth. I like knowing who I'm dealing with. And I just want to remind folks of what Martin Luther King had said. One of the many things that he had said, which was the greatest stumbling blocks, right, to justice in America was not going to be the Ku Klux Klanmen or the White Citizens Council. It was going to be the white moderate who put their own comfort ahead of justice. And so much in the same way that I never needed Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer to don kente cloth and to take a knee in the Capitol building during the George Floyd uprisings of the 2020s, I don't need white supremacists pretending that they aren't white supremacists. And so, with that said, dear friends, there is something important here, though, to acknowledge. And it is this. And if you joined me earlier with Wajahat on Democracy Ish, which now comes to you twice a week on Mondays and Fridays at 12 p.m. Eastern, then you might have seen this. But I thought that it was important enough to repeat again today. Black History Month is an annual celebration of the achievements by African Americans and a time for recognizing their central role in U.S. history. Also known as African American History Month. It grew out of Negro History Week, the brainchild of noted historian Carter G. Woodson. And like I said at the top, has been celebrated by every U.S. president since 1976, including countries like Canada and the UK. It is a month-long celebration. And here's the thing, folks. This is the other thing that I want white people in particular who listen to my shows to understand. You all are asking, Danielle, what can I do? What should my resistance look like? What should I be doing? Right? This is what you should be doing. You should be educating yourselves and everyone around you. You should create a syllabus for yourself. Go put into Google, what are the books that have been banned? What are the things, right, that have been eliminated? What is this administration trying so hard to ban me from knowing and understanding? Why are they trying so hard to ensure that I am undereducated, that I don't have any critical thought? And then educate yourselves. But it is not enough, right, to just read a few quotes about Martin Luther King during the month of February or lift up Harriet Tubman. There have been inventors, artists, activists, musicians, poets, astronauts, teachers throughout the beginning of time, and by time I mean particularly in this country, of peoples whose accomplishments are actually a part of your day-to-day life, but it's been kept from you for a reason, as not to know about them, as not to question them, as to keep white supremacy as the center of this country. And so it is not just enough for you to say, well, I want you, dear white people, to start thinking in we's. What is it we need to do? How do we educate our children, our grandchildren in the white communities so that they don't grow up to continue with this sickness and this virus of racism? Because trust me, Black and brown people already do the work, right? Because we wouldn't survive otherwise, knowing what to trust about white people, what to do when cops stop us, how to act, how to bring our tempers down, how to walk this balance beam of racism in this country. It is up to you to teach your children, your grandchildren, the truth, particularly at a time when it is being erased from their history. That's your job. You educate yourselves and you bring everybody else along with you. Don't come here and tell me about how racist your family is or how racist your colleagues are if you are not willing to call out that racism and then to call those people in, right? And challenge them in ways that they can be heard. I don't need more white people throwing up their hands and abdicating their responsibility. Racism is not going to die out. If it would have died out hundreds of years ago. It is passed down like a fucking heirloom. And the only way that it stops is if it is disrupted, and it is not Black people's job to disrupt what we did not create. That is what I want folks to be taking in and understanding about not this month, but the years ahead, where your responsibility lies. The other thing that I pulled today before we move on is this. It's a quote from the late, great, magnificent actress and activist Cicely Tyson, who said this: "The moment anyone tries to demean or degrade you in any way, you have to know how great you are. Nobody would bother to beat you down if you were not a threat." Let me say that again. The moment anyone tries to demean or degrade you in any way, you have to know how great you are. Nobody would bother to beat you down if you were not a threat. So, to my Black and brown folks, to my queer folks, my Muslim folks, my Jewish folks, my disabled folks, women, right? To all of those that are not white, straight, cis, and male. The reason why they are fighting so hard to eradicate us, to stop us, is because they see the value in our collective power. And if they see the value in our collective power enough to try and stop it, then we have to see it enough in trying to grow it. Because that is why they are putting us and pinning us against each other, just scrambling around for the scraps that they want to leave behind. We don't have to fight over their crumbs. We deserve the whole fucking pie. And that is why they are doing what they are doing right now. And it is not to say, dear friends, it is not to say that it is not scary. It is not to say that it is not, right, terrifying to think about friends and family members being carted off, or yourself. But it is to say that we have more power than we believe that they do, because they wouldn't be going to the lengths that they're going to right now if we didn't. Our progress is a threat to them. So they must make enemies of everyone and put us in barrels in order to reign. So I need you to understand that very point.
I was growing up, I was taught in American history books that Africa had no history, and neither did I. That I was a savage, about whom the less said the better, who had been saved by Europe and brought to America. And of course, I believed it. I didn't have much choice. Those were the only books there were. I am stating very seriously, and this is not an overstatement, that I picked the cotton, and I carried its market, and I built the railroad under someone else's whip for nothing. For nothing. If one has got to prove one's title to the land, isn't 400 years enough? 400 years, at least 3 wars. The American soil is full of the corpses of my ancestors. Why is my freedom or my citizenship or my right to live there, how is it conceivably a question now? What we are not facing is the results of what we've done. What one begs the American people to do for all our sakes is simply to accept our history until the moment comes when we, the Americans, we, the American people, we are trying to forge a new identity for which we need each other. Until this moment, there is scarcely any hope for the American dream, because the people who are denied participation in it, by their very presence, will wreck it.
That is the late, great James Baldwin on understanding American history. And the reason why American history is not taught. And the fact is that we need each other. And until white Americans understand that fact, we will continue to regurgitate past ills over and over and over again. And I said this earlier today on Democracy-ish, when I said we have to understand that the very people that we are fighting against are the children of those that would rather drain swimming pools in their communities rather than integrate them. They would rather their children not swim and face the heat of 1,000 summers than integrate their own pools. These are their children. They are willing, folks, to literally die of whiteness, as my friend Dr. Jonathan Metzl wrote about. They would rather die of whiteness than have accepted health care from a black man. So we have to understand the mentality that we are dealing with here. And you don't deal with it by burying your heads in the sand. You don't deal with it by cutting off members of your own family. You deal with it through education, persistence, passion, and integrity, and consistency. You see, my problem over the summer of 2020, over that uprising after we were all in our homes watching the murder of George Floyd in real time with the casual knee of ex-white officer Derek Chauvin, is that people left their homes in the middle of a pandemic to go and protest. But then once life seemingly started to go back to normal, white America gave up their internship into racism and white supremacy and went on with their lives. We need consistency. We need people to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because you see, the pursuit of justice requires us all to sacrifice something. It requires us to give up our levels of comfort and decide that we want more. And we are told with each passing generation, now is not the time. Wait. Well, folks, we have actually run out of time. A white supremacist, an avowed white supremacist, is now the president of the United States. He has everything and everyone lined up and is moving at breakneck pace. None of which should have been a shock to anybody that had been paying attention for the last 9 years. Because it's not that democracy dies in darkness, as the Washington Post once stated and believed. It's that it dies in broad daylight, where everybody has their hands in their pockets and is looking away. I want to show you something with regard to the sentiment around draining your own pool rather than integrate. Florida, under the reign of Ron DeSantis, concocted the war on wokeness, the war on consciousness, which is what we need to say that it is. Because MAGA needs sheep, not people that are paying attention. And because of that, they have gutted their education system from the inside out. And what has been the result? Florida reading, math scores fall to lowest mark in more than 20 years on the nation's report card. We all know that Florida, their education system has never been great. But when Ron DeSantis decided to take a sledgehammer to it, you had scorns of teachers that began to quit or get pushed out. And then what did Ron DeSantis decide to do? He said, oh, anybody can stand in front of a classroom. So if you've been an active military and you're retired now, you have no education experience whatsoever, well, you can stand in front of a classroom. This is now the result of that. And let me ask you something. Who do you think that these kids are going to be hired by in the future? What jobs do you think that you're going to have when you've received a piss poor education for 12 years? What college are you going to? You have to understand that the purpose of all of this is to create a permanent underclass in America, because you see, the wealthy will take their kids out and they will put them in private schools. Their next thing now is to gut public education altogether. They're revamping the curriculum to ensure that children know nothing about real history, know nothing whatsoever about this country, know nothing about critical thinking. And if a public school decides to rebuff that, then the threat is that we will take your money away and put that towards charter schools or religious institutions. That is where your tax dollars are headed. So what we look at in Florida isn't going to remain in Florida. As I've said for so long, Florida and Texas are MAGA's petri dishes, to where they concoct their worst. They see how it works out in the wild, and then it catches fire nationwide. So it won't be so long for the entirety of this country to have reading and math scores that fall well below where our other industrial nations are. This is the purposeful dumbing down of America. Because if you're educated, you ask questions. If you ask questions, you eventually want change. And if you eventually want change, then the powerful begin to lose their power. And they don't want that. They don't want that at all. It's important to see, folks, that these are not siloed incidents that are happening, that everything is part of a larger plan and needs to be connected into the larger scheme and project that is underway. It is extraordinarily wild where we find ourselves right now. And, just as a little reminder, that the Republican Party gained control of the Florida legislature, governorship, and cabinet just over 20 years ago. They began dismantling public education right away. That is why that state finds itself in the position that it is in. So for 20 years, they have gutted that education system. And now, to boot, I guess what they can applaud themselves for is that their kids don't know how to read or do math, let alone know anything about science, real science, and not the junk shit that they want to teach them. The goal is a permanent underclass in America. So, speaking of stupid, let's talk about what Donald Trump was doing over the weekend, shall we? Which is going to war, a trade war with our allies. That even the Wall Street Journal, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, the editorial board wrote the dumbest trade war in history. Trump will impose 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico for no good reason. It goes on. The Wall Street Journal editorial board slams Trump's trade war with Canada and Mexico. Quote, Mr. Trump sometimes sounds as if the U.S. shouldn't import anything at all, that America can be a perfectly closed economy, making everything at home. This is called autocrat, and it isn't the world we live in, or one that we should want to live in, as Mr. Trump may soon find out. None of this is supposed to happen under the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement that Mr. Trump negotiated and signed in his first term. The U.S. willingness to ignore its treaty obligations, even with friends, won't make other countries eager to do deals. Maybe Mr. Trump will claim victory and pull back if he wins some token concessions. But if a North America trade war persists, it will qualify as one of the dumbest in history. You will never hear me say this, probably ever again. But the Wall Street Journal is right. Right now, there is a pause on the tariffs with Mexico because the Mexican President Sheinbaum, is sending 10,000 troops to the border to stop fentanyl, which, by the way, doesn't actually come through the border. The tariffs have now also been paused with Canada. Because guess what? It's just fucking stupid. And it's not a tariff that anybody else is going to pay but us. And so Donald Trump, all he cares about is appeasing the 1%, the very people that funded his campaign, and paying them back in the form of tax cuts. And where else is that going to come from if not from the American people? So once again, the man who wrote The Art of the Deal, or at least had his face on a book that said Art of the Deal, can't seem to actually make a good one. 1 minute, trade war. Next minute, Greenland. The other minute, the Panama Canal. The other minute, someplace fucking else. It is, dear friends, an absolute shit show. Which brings me to the article that I encourage everyone to read. And when I tell you who it's by, you're going to say, but Danielle, I've heard you talk about him on other shows, and you don't necessarily agree with him on much. And you're right, I don't. But I did believe Ezra Klein's latest op-ed in the New York Times was actually worth sharing. You see, why don't I like Ezra Klein's reporting these days? Well, because he comes from a very cis, white, hetero, shit's really not that bad because I'm not from a marginalized community. And, things won't immediately impact me type of lens. But this piece, I highly encourage everyone to check out because it's worth the read. So this is what I want to lift up. If you want to understand the first few weeks of the second Trump administration, you should listen to what Steve Bannon told PBS's Frontline in 2019. Steve Bannon. The opposition party is the media. And the media can only, because they're dumb and lazy, they can only focus on one thing at a time. All we have to do is flood the zone every day we hit them with 3 things. They'll bite on one. We'll get all of our stuff done. Bang, bang, bang. These guys will never be able to recover. But we've got to start with muzzle velocity. So it's got to start, and it's got to hammer, and it's got to, interruption, Michael Kirk, what was the word? Muzzle velocity. So Klein writes this. Muzzle velocity. Bannon's insight here is real. Focus is the fundamental substance of democracy. It is particularly the substance of opposition. People largely learn of what the government is doing through the media, be it mainstream media or social media. If you overwhelm the media, if you give it too many places to look all at once, if you keep it moving from one thing to the next, no coherent opposition can emerge. It is hard to even think coherently. So I want you all to think about just yourselves over the last 2 weeks, how you have actually been feeling, the pace at which you've been trying to answer every ding that comes through your phone or your computer. News alert, news alert, news alert. Trump signed this executive order. He just froze this thing. Elon Musk has control of this. It has been one thing after another after another. And for years, I have said that Steve Bannon's strategy is a smart one, because mainstream corporate media in 9 years of Donald Trump has not figured out what is the most important thing. What is the theme here that we need to pull out? What do the American people actually need to know? No. Instead, the Trump regime throws out a bunch of red bouncing balls, and the media is like this. And because the media can't get their shit straight, neither can the American people. So then what do? We tap the fuck out. Because if I can't follow 16 stories in one day, guess what I'm going to decide to do? Not follow a goddamn thing. And then what happens, folks? If I'm not following the news of what they're doing, then I'm not resisting what they're doing. And if I'm not resisting what they're doing, then they run roughshod over the entire country by virtue of what? Exhaustion and apathy, which breeds hopelessness. That has been the goal. That has been the mission. And that is what has been working like clockwork over the last 2 weeks. It is why I tell everybody that listens to any of my shows to take a break so that you don't have a breakdown. That you do not need to follow every single headline, but you do need to be clear about the strategies that are being used to pit us against one another. That the whole idea is to overwhelm and disconnect us from ourselves and each other. And if we do that, they win. So if the goal is to pit us against each other, then resistance looks like connectivity. If the goal is to swarm us with lies, then the resistance looks like focusing on what we can control. If the goal is to eradicate and erase all forms of education that is not centered around powerful white men, then the resistance looks like educating myself on everyone else. You have got to understand the game that they are playing so that you are able to build a strategy around it. If you don't understand the game, you can't change the game. Do you understand what I'm saying? So when you have this in your face all day, 24/7, then the goal, the desire is going to be to stick your fingers in your ears and cover your eyes. It's natural because it is a protection mechanism. So you have to figure out, what can I control? What matters in this moment? If they are working so hard for me to pay attention to X, then Y must be the most important thing right now. And when I tell you, friends, that building community is not just a nice to have, but it is necessary for our survival right now, then I mean for you not to just stay locked in side of yourself and in your own fear. I mean for you to reach for one another, to build community with people, to arm yourselves with education so that you can begin to see what exactly is possible in this moment, because they want you to believe that everything that you want is impossible, that they have already won. And this is why Klein's article is important, because he says this: Trump knows the power of marketing. If you make people believe something is true, you make it likelier that it becomes true. Trump clawed his way back to great wealth by playing a fearsome billionaire on TV. He remade himself as a winner by refusing to admit he had ever lost. The American presidency is a limited office, but Trump has never wanted to be president, at least not as defined in Article 2 of the Constitution. He has always wanted to be king. His plan this time is to first play king on TV. If we believe he is already king, we will be likelier to let him govern as a king. That is the reason why I entitled today's show, MAGA Desperately Wants to Anoint Trump. Because if we believe that he won in a landslide, which he keeps repeating, if we believe that the American people gave him a mandate, which he keeps repeating, then we will believe that there is more of MAGA than there is of us. And the fact of the matter, friends, is that that is the biggest lie that they have sold. There is not more of them. They are just fucking louder. And they have better marketing. And they have echo chambers that they have built to amplify their message. But there are actually, physically, really more of us than there are of them. They are just playing us inside of their MAGA house of horrors, having us look each and every way, up, down, and around, believing that they are all coming and invading us. It is a game. And it is not to say that they are not dangerous. It is not to say that now the richest man in the world, who has access to our Social Security numbers, people's pensions, their sensitive financial informations, that he has given that over to Elon Musk, who bought the keys to 330 million Americans' lives for less than $300 million. It's not to say that these people are not dangerous, folks. It's just to say that you have power. And your power is in your ability to focus. Your power is in your ability to build resistance and build community at the same time, and stop looking for these motherfuckers like Schumer and Pelosi to come and save us when they don't even know where the fuck we are right now. They think that they're playing 20th century politics, that they're going to write a memo and write our way out of this. That ain't it. But the first thing that we have to understand is the mechanisms that they are using so that we don't fall for them. People keep telling me, I feel so overwhelmed. I feel so hopeless. I don't know what to do. Educate yourself. This is not the first time. These are not new tactics. Here's the other piece. Klein goes on to say, Trump may not see his own fork in the road coming. He may believe he has the power he is claiming. That would be a mistake on his part, a self-deception that could doom his presidency. But the real threat is if he persuades the rest of us to believe he has the power he does not have. The first 2 weeks of Trump's presidency have not shown his strength. He is trying to overwhelm you. He is trying to keep you off balance. He is trying to persuade you of something that isn't true. Don't believe him. That's the truth here, folks. The biggest advantage that Donald Trump has is that now that he's won the presidency, the media can't take their eyes off of him. So he has the ability to overwhelm. He is playing with smoke and mirrors. It is why over the weekend, trade war with Mexico and Canada. Monday morning, the fucking Dow is tanking. Monday evening, trade war off. One day it is, I'm freezing all federal aid. I'm shutting everything down. The next day, panic, freeze off. All of this is about creating overwhelm and concentrated chaos. These are strategies. These are tactics. And once you understand that you are being played, you can opt out of their fucking game and start figuring out for yourselves what your resistance looks like. I will end today with this quote by Audre Lorde, which I think is really important. And I have a couple of more minutes. Hang in there with me. But we're moving towards the end of today's show. Poetry is not a luxury. It is a vital necessity of our existence. It forms the quality of the light within which we predict our hopes and dreams toward a survival and change, first made into language, then into idea, then into more tangible action. Poetry is the way we help give name to the nameless so it can be thought. The farthest horizons of our hopes and fears are cobbled by our poems, carved from the rock experiences of our daily lives. You see, art and music matter more now than they ever have before. It is integral to our survival, to our sanity, that we hold tight to what actually brings us together, which is music, which is literature, which is art. Because the artists in this moment are telling us a story. They are telling us about who we are and who we have the possibility of becoming. You know, last night was the Grammys, which I don't watch award shows anymore. I think they're very self-congratulatory, and I'm not particularly interested in them. However, this win by Beyonce for not only album of the year, but country album of the year was significant for her Cowboy Carter album. I don't care what people think about Beyonce. I don't like her. I don't think that she's that. I don't give a fuck. And I'm not here to debate you. I will tell you that her winning, she is only the fourth Black woman to win Album of the Year in the Grammys history. She was shut out of the Country Music Awards completely. Meanwhile, her album has been number one on country music charts for the year. The first Black woman to do it, not because there have not been other Black women, but because they have all been shut out by a racist system that profits off of our consumption and steers our culture. Beyonce crafted an album that taught a lesson about the fundamentals of our American story and who actually has ownership, the rights to our American story. And I encourage you to listen to it, not because I'm trying to convince you of Beyonce's brilliance, because if you don't see that, that's your own shit. But to understand why an entire white music award show like the CMAs would see her as such a threat as to shut her out completely. Because it goes back to my opening quote from Cicely Tyson. No one would try to silence you if they didn't think that your voice was a threat. It's really important to understand that right now we may find ourselves speaking in double talk, using art and poetry as a way in this fascist regime as they begin to clamp down on free speech and free press. It will be the artists that guide us through, that send us messages of hope through their art, that remind us of our collective humanity. Because as James Baldwin has said, love has never been a popular movement.
Love is never been.
We get to decide who we are going to be, what we are going to consume, and how we are going to move forward. Art and love have always been universal. So you can choose humanity in this moment at a time of deep depravity and evil. And for those in the chat that are talking about, oh, rich celebrities are going to save us, then you're not listening to anything that I've said. You're not paying attention. And I encourage you to dig deeper than a puddle. No one is coming to save us. We have to decide to save ourselves. And I am providing here ideas of tools that can be used not only to help educate you on what is being tried to be kept from you, but also what can be used to lift your spirits when you find yourselves circling the drain of despair. Taking in what I'm saying is a choice. You can change the fucking channel. But in this moment, when people are trying to shut out voices, erase history, close down curriculum, rewrite the Constitution, reign with terror, and have us all running for cover to trying to save our own asses instead of recognizing that our power is in the collective, decide which place you are going to be. Decide how you're going to exist. Because the space that I am creating here is about reminding us all of our power and creating community. You don't like that? Change the fucking channel while you still have choices. That is it for me today, dear friends, on the Danielle Moodie Show. As always, power to the people and to all the people power. Get woke, stay sane, and in these extraordinarily dangerous times, dear friends, please do stay safe. I will be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern, for Town Hall Tuesday. So please do come with your questions and your thoughts. At the end of the show, I will do my best for about 15 to 20 minutes to answer as many things as I possibly can. For those that provided donations today, I want to say thank you very much for supporting independent media. If you do not have the money to spare, think about liking, commenting, and subscribing to this channel. As soon as I go off air, the video is posted. Share it on your platforms and your networks with your friends, your families, your colleagues. You can do that. But to those that have $1 to spare, I appreciate it. It goes so very far in allowing me to continue to do this work. I will see you all back here tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern. Be well.